start there every day, no matter what? How's the traffic getting in there? Did you go down Lower Broadway? Forget it. Take you 45 minutes? 45? My wife went to haircut on Newberry Street a couple weeks ago, even before school started. She just can't believe the traffic on Lower Broadway in the morning.
Today I was so bad that I diverted to 16.
Yeah. 2 light cycles.
Really?
I had a little bit at the Rotary. Once we get past the Rotary and get down to there's maybe 2 light cycles.
Traffic hasn't been in it. Everyone thought they was going to shut the city down. It hasn't been that bad of an issue.
No, it's different times. They're not school times down the casino.
I'm amazed how the traffic is slow.
Yeah.
I guess they said this weekend.
Really?
I mean, occasionally we got some. Well, they've been doing work on Revere Beach, Mystic Valley Parkway up at the zoo.
Yeah, yeah. They're doing that up. Now they're doing the right. I was up there yesterday. I was doing that.
Stone, so I was
Yeah.
coming home,
Yeah.
and they always divert you down. So I'm like, all right, I'll just come down 93 and go to Wellington. And actually, it's not that hard to come through Wellington.
Niskadel.
But all of a sudden, one day I came home and it said, Sunday I came home, because it was a weekend, and they were saying, Encore, sign for Encore Parking.
Yeah.
Parking at Resort. Parking full.
As I say, give me a couple of days and I can take care of it.
All right, so what, I go away next.
We have more kids that we need to service, and then it was,
I'm pulling the. I'm gonna pull. I think Malden's. Malden's
high school's not for everybody.
I mean, Revere and Kelsey's policy are very similar because, and I know both superintendents there.
Originally thought it was just a
There's no sense in
sunburn.
reinventing the wheel.
Then I went again in June. The guy said,
Surgery
okay,
replaced Chelsea forever. Nine spots.
I got an appointment.
Everybody, please take their seat. We'll get started with the meeting, please.
I gotta go to
Add
Needle.
certain things in there.
Thank you.
What?
You do a roll call, please.
All right. It's the meeting, it's a joint convention of the City Council and the School Committee. The roll call. Councilor Capone?
Here.
Councilor DeFlorio? Councilor DePiero?
Here.
Councilor Hanlon? Councilor Marchese?
Here.
Councilor Matusky? Councilor McKinnon? Councilor McLaughlin?
Here.
Councilor Napolitano? Councilor Simonelli?
Here.
And President Della Sola?
Here.
Chairman Abraze? Mr. School Committee Member Almeida? Barros? School Committee Member Cardello? School Committee Member D'Onofrio? School Committee Member Ela? School Committee Member LaMonica? School Committee Member McLaughlin? School Committee Member Panarisi? And School Committee Member Parker. We have 14 members present. You do have a quorum. We rise for the
Please
Pledge of
stand.
Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we stay standing, please? I just want to do a moment of silence for the 2 victims we lost on the tragic fire on Madison Ave during the weekend. And also, please stand and ask, inform that Mr. Dolan, the past principal of the schools, has passed away.
John Dolan.
John Dolan. Thank you very much. Clerk, can you read the one piece that's on the agenda for tonight, please?
The order before you, councilmen and school committee members, is in order that the Task Force on School Finance hired to look into the Everett School Department hereby presents their findings to a joint convention of the City Council and School Committee. I believe the mayor would like to begin the evening by having a few words, and then we'd open it up to the task force and Dr. Easy.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk and Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council and School Committee. Thank you for being here this evening. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to thank the task force for their hard work. I know it's been about 18 months. I'd like to especially also thank Dr. Easy for heading this for us during this 18 months and working with the task force, and also the CFO, Eric Demas, for all his work in ensuring that this report was completed. To John Fullerton, John, thank you very much. Mr. Sloan, Barry, thank you very much. Dwayne, Dr. Thomas, thank you very much, and Sam Tyler, to the four of you. I tasked you with this issue here in the city, and we want to thank you for taking time out of your schedules, because each and every one of you have a very busy life. If you get to know either one of you, you'll know the hard work that you put in your regular jobs and duties, and to put this on your shoulders, I want to thank you on behalf of all the residents of the city of Everett, taxpayers, school children, for what you did for us. We owe you a lot. So thank you very much, and I'm sure everyone's excited to hear your report. So thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you.
I think Dr. Easy would like to begin, and then move it on to the task force.
Good evening, everyone. So the mayor pretty much said everything I was going to say about our task force, but I was going to say greetings and thank you for being here. We truly appreciate each and every one of you from both committees to be here today. I was fortunate enough to manage and direct this task force for a year and a half, and the hard work and commitment that these gentlemen put into this project. It's been a while, and it's a long waiting report, and I hope you did some homework and read through it before we get here today. And Mr. Tyler will be taking the lead on presenting this, but I really wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, we really appreciate the work you guys did for our city, and bringing forward some issues, and hopefully we can take heed to the recommendations and implement them as soon as possible. Mr. Tyler.
All right, on behalf of the task force, Mr. Clerk, members of the City Council and the School Committee, we're, after, as Dr. Easy said, a long time, we're happy to be able to present this report. I don't usually have that problem, but you know, as you know, the reason that this task force was put together was basically because of a financial problem with the school department. It was a year, I think, of unexpected expenses. There were 25 special needs students from out of the district that came to Everett. That required also some capital work. There's a grant that was expected that didn't arrive. And the school department had been really wrestling with the issue that the state, through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, had changed the definition of poverty, which, with a high-need school district that Everett has, made a big difference. So I think, from what we're told, like in fiscal 19, this had the effect of like over a $6 million hit of money that would have come. And these families and students are still in the Everett public school system. So it's, you know, the gateway cities and cities like Everett really were impacted by that. But I think, as you will read or have read in the report, I mean, the primary reason is that the school department authorized the hiring of 97 employees without appropriation to support those positions. So there's one group of 65 employees that was an estimated cost of $3.4 million, and 32 employees at $2.2 million, so a total of 9.7 with a cost of about $5.6 million. We've looked at all this pretty carefully, and this is during the term of Superintendent Forestier, and who was, as you know, superintendent for 30 years, and I think I was impressed, we all were impressed in terms of what he was able to do with a high-needs school district like Everett, to the point where, the state classification of schools, those that were classified by the state were all level 1, level 2 schools here in Everett. And there's a newer classification structure, and that Everett is partially meeting targets, which is really the same equivalent. It's really the top half of all districts in the state in terms of performance. So that's impressive. But the mayor was the superintendent was a commanding force, both in the school department and the city. And we do have to note that his management style was a factor in the financial problems experienced in 2018. And then the mayor and the council in the second half of fiscal 18 appropriated $5 million in February and had to go to reserves to provide those funding because of the spending in the school department. And later on in March, there was another supplementary appropriation of about $500,000. So that really is sort of the background to the creation of the task force, because there had been a need in the 2 prior years, fiscal 16, fiscal 17, for supplementary budgets in the second half of the fiscal year for the school department. So it was an ongoing issue that needed to be addressed. I think the task force charge to us by the mayor was to assess the school department financial operations, including its budget process, discern the reasons for school spending beyond the original fiscal 18 appropriation by the mayor and council, evaluate the school department's execution of spending and position control, and then make recommendations for improvement. Now, if we had stayed at just that core issue, we would have been done sooner, but the task force really thought that this was an opportunity to take a broader look at the Everett city government, and so we really looked at a number of other issues beyond just that school issue, which helped us in terms of developing the recommendations that we are making, and it also resulted in some recommendations that really were not germane to the issue of the school finance problem. I think I have to say that we've been very happy that from the support we received from city and school officials, and the task force really worked totally independent. The task force determined the scope of the report and had full access to what information was felt necessary for its work, and access to city and school officials and employees in seeking information. So on this, the mayor was hands-off and no involvement. This is totally a task force. Task force was created with these 4 individuals because they didn't have prior involvement with Everett. It was meant to be an independent group that was going to provide a thorough and objective report, and I think that's what we've done. We were very indebted to the senior team of the mayor and the superintendent. So on the school side, that would be Assistant Superintendent for Business Affairs, Charles Obrensky, and Assistant Superintendent Kevin Shaw, which we are very grateful for their help. And on the city side, Chief Financial Officer Eric Demas and Dr. Easy. When it came to doing more research to write the report, that expanded the number of people we talked to. Just for example, Assessing Commissioner B.J. Devereux, because we do get into those issues in this report, and Special Education Director on the school side, William Donahue. Our first meeting was in February 15th in 2018. Our last meeting was June 13th, 2019, so it's a total of 9 meetings. A good part of that was more in the beginning, dealing with meetings with then Superintendent Forestieri and the senior team, and then later with Interim Superintendent Janice Gautier and her senior team. We had meetings, 2 different sets of meetings with some of the school committee members. And then, as I said, we worked harder and longer in order to have a broader scope to the report, a more comprehensive description of the City of Everett's organizational structure, financial position, management over 5 years, a separate section on the school department, including demographics, operations, finances, management. We also spent a amount of time to really understanding the high needs population and what that means, and so we found that there is growth in the special needs population, but the real growth is in the more severe high needs populations, which is more expensive. So this is a report that totals 45 pages of the written report, 29 pages, 16 pages of appendix, and it's really meant to be a more comprehensive report that can be of interest, we hope, to a wider group of Everett citizens and officials because of the broad scope of information it provides. If I had to provide a quick overview in terms of the city and the school department, I guess that we would say that the city's well managed. It's in a good financial position. That should improve thanks to the casino, thanks to the fact that there'll be more restaurants and hotels, so there'll be a growth in the meals excise and the room occupancy excise, as well as property taxes. We looked at the fact that property values, both residential and commercial, have grown substantially over the last couple of years. And then for the school department, well, the other piece, just in terms of the good management, took a look at the financial statements, also the Standard & Poor, and I guess it's S&P Global rating report, AAA, AA plus for Everett, and high marks from the rating agency. School department is successful in its high needs urban system. As one of the things we looked at was the fact that the starting point used to be the net school spending, which is the minimum that the state requires to ensure that there's adequate education for the students of each school district, and but that wasn't enough. So we looked at other comparable school districts and what they were providing in terms of financial support for the school department over net school spending, and so we did want to look at that. So that's I guess the overview. This would get us now into the recommendations that we make that are also on the screen. Given the fact that our primary purpose was to look at the school financial issue, and that being the problem being the 97 employees added to the payroll without ensuring that there was adequate resources, led us to, after we had spent some time looking at the City of Everett's and basically the Chief Financial Officer's protocol for managing expenditures in all city departments, and particularly how it relates to personnel, we basically felt that the primary recommendation of this group was really that what procedures are in place for personnel control and spending needs to be also exercised by the school department. There is a distinction. The report discusses the financial management process for the city and also the school department, and that difference needs to be bridged so that it doesn't change the school department's ability and the school committee's ability to hire employees they want. It's just that there has to be certainty that there are dollars to support those positions, as is the case for all city departments. Now, Proposition 2.5 does provide or restrict, does not restrict the ability of the school department to determine, and basically the school committee to determine how the school budget is going to be allocated. Nobody else has that responsibility, but that does not mean that the city is not able to institute spending and personnel controls for the school department that applies to all other city departments. So, I mean, that's really, that recommendation would have solved, I think, that problem. The second recommendation we make is that there should be a new position created in the city's finance department to really serve as a resource on school financial and policy matter or issues. This person would develop a collaborative working relationship with school officials, with the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, House and Senate Education Committees, basically follow school policy at the state level, and Education Aid Chapter 70 changes, which we're in the midst of right now. There's a number of reasons for that. I mean, that the mayor really needs to have that information, and there needs to be, really good collaboration between, the mayor's office and the superintendent's office, which I will get to later, which we are seeing and support. But this is important because of the extent that the school department budget affects the city's finances. In fiscal 19, the school department budget represented 39% of the total city budget, and that I don't think that includes some of the chargebacks that are really school-related. The school department represented 64% of all employees, and that's where most of the spending in any city is. 90% of state aid and 63% of state assessment. So it's just too big a part of overall city finances that there isn't more support. So this is meant to be a resource, a support, to help in terms of the education, not establish education policy for the school department. That's the school committee's responsibility, but just more of a resource that can help the city understand the situation better, but also work really collaboratively with the school department. The third recommendation is that the school or the city should continue the recent approach that has been agreed upon with the interim superintendent and the mayor in developing the school department's operating budget by estimating the total general fund revenues from all sources that would be available to the school department in time to be included in the superintendent's recommended budget to the school committee for the following year. We were looking at, over the years, the use of supplementary budgets, how municipal Medicaid was used, and when it was applied to the school department, when it wasn't, but when it was approved to be. And one of the things that we're, I think, concerned about is that, for the principals to be able to develop their budgets, they really need to know the full amount of resources available to them when they are developing the budget. And so the decision that has already been implemented and hopefully will continue to have both city and school officials work together to figure out the total dollar amount that would be available for the school department, and that if there are supplementary appropriations, it's for emergency reasons only, not waiting for money to come in that is going to come in and you'll appropriate later. I think that really was in the best interest of the school department or, frankly, the city. The fourth recommendation is that the school committee should fully exercise its fiduciary responsibility of budget beyond the development and approval of the budget, but also in the management of spending and position control of the budget. By the city charter, the school committee is required to adopt and oversee administration of the budget. So that's not just approving the budget, it's also being careful and prudently reviewing spending to make sure that there are sufficient resources for the spending, and that, frankly, spending doesn't occur unless there are sufficient resources. we also note that there are 3 members of the finance subcommittee, school committee finance subcommittee involved with, really involved with the budget. In our mind, the budget is a policy document in terms of how the school system will operate, how it will serve the students, the parents, and it's one that, in our view, all school committee members should be as equally active involved. If there are, creation of subcommittees, so that each school committee member has a responsibility, and that in subsequent years, perhaps those responsibilities could change so that, depending on their length of service, they would even have a much broader expertise in all aspects of school operations. But that would also help in terms of the review of spending during the course of the year as well. The 5th recommendation deals with the School Finance Review Commission, which we believe should be also placing more emphasis on monitoring the administration of school expenditures and position control. So that's in its purview. We understand that it serves as an advisory body, but because of the makeup of the committee of senior members of the school department and city council, it's in our mind appropriate to have that as part of its responsibility to review the spending. And I know from our discussions with the chief financial officer that he's had occasion recently to be able to weigh in on these issues before the commission. So we just want to point to the fact that we believe that's an important responsibility. We'd also say that the 2 school committee members serving on this commission, in our view, should report monthly to the full school committee on the proceedings of the last commission meeting. We've had some meetings with school committee members who really weren't aware of what was going on with the commission, and I think that's doesn't really fully carry out the purpose of the commission. Having to work with the school budget and understanding it over a long period of time, we think that the school committee should consider upgrading its budget software to provide data in a more informative and transparent format. The current system does not really allow an aggregation of data in formats that can provide summary and various detailed reports that would be helpful to school, other public officials, parents, and the general public. We also, in looking for information, were disappointed by what we found on the school department's website. And so we urge the school committee and superintendent to better utilize the website to provide summary, detailed information about the school department budget, other important issues for parents and general public. I mean, there's nothing on the website now that deals with the budget, not the superintendent's recommended budget, not the final budget, and not any narrative to help people understand, the policy directives and why money is spent on various purposes. There's also, circulars that are, I'm sure, issued that could be on the website. So if you were to look at other school department websites, I think you would find that they utilize it much more as a way to communicate with the general public than is the case in Everett, and it's easy enough to do. So we recommend that. Sort of varying away from the immediate needs of the task force and what we are charged with, we also say that we think that the members of the school committee should take precaution to avoid any possible conflict of interest violations in votes taken as a consequence of any family members working for the Everett Public Schools. I think 2/3 of the members of the school committee have members of the family working for the school department, and they need to take appropriate action in voting on collective bargaining contracts or other votes that affect personnel. Now, we also have 2 recommendations that have nothing to do with the school department, but it's because of the broad scope that we applied to this study, and both have to do with casino revenues. We think that the distribution of annual casino revenue, which, as we understand, is $25 million a year, which will increase by 2.5% each year, that those revenues for the city should include annual appropriations to help address the funding of Everett's long-term accumulated and unfunded pension and retiree health insurance liabilities. Now, the pension fund funded ratio is around 60% in 2018, which is the last report. And to the city's credit, it's expected to reach full funding by 2030, which is earlier than the state requires. But 60% is sort of a little low as to where it should be right now. The OPEB, or retiree health insurance liability, is a much greater problem. That liability is $255.8 million of unfunded liability, and the funded ratio is only 1.8%. I mean, I think it's a little over $4 million. Now, I agree, and we agree, that the primary focus should be on the pension liability, but you have an opportunity to do more with the OPEB liability, and I know that there is the provision that, you know, a certain percentage of free cash would be available to that, but that's really not enough. So that's our one of our non-school recommendations. The other having to do with casino revenue is that the distribution of casino revenue for the city should be dedicated to ongoing critical needs of the city in its provision and of operational and capital expenditures. In our view, going forward, these funds should not be applied to reducing property owners' tax bills. That is how the $12.5 million for the last 2 years were used, and we do have a section in the report that looks at Everett and other cities surrounding Everett as to the average single-family tax bill. And in Everett, it's in fiscal 19, the average single tax bill was $3,339, which in fiscal 19 was the second lowest average single-family tax bill out of 22 communities in the Boston area. So it's not as if it's a real high tax bill, and obviously this is average, so there are those who are much higher and some that are lower. But I think, you know, the casino revenue and that what follows in terms of new growth from more development, meals excise, room occupancy excise. I mean, we're at a point where, you know, we have to be careful about downturn in the economy and preparing for that. And so this is sort of some of us wearing other hats that sort of came up with that recommendation. But anyway, those are our 9 recommendations from our report. We also, looking ahead, want to note that the budget situation in fiscal 2018 and change in school leadership have led to, in our view, an improved spirit of cooperation and communication between the mayor and his senior team and the interim superintendent and her senior team. And we think that's very encouraging. We also think that the scope of the report that we have issued is broader than the specific school finance issue, and that all 9 task force recommendations should be seriously considered and implemented. But in the end, we think that the new collaborative environment and the implementation of the recommendations combined in this report should be given a chance to work. And so we would have recommended perhaps more, but we're encouraged by what we've seen just in the short time that we've been involved. We also think, you know, if you don't measure it, people don't take advantage or implement. So we think that the recommendations, the 9 recommendations of this commission or this task force should be reviewed by the school commission, School Financial Review Commission, a year from now to determine whether these recommendations have been implemented or not, and if not, Why not? And if they have, has that made a difference? And continue doing that in subsequent years if they feel it's helpful and necessary. We had toyed with some other recommendations that we didn't implement or didn't include in the report. One was that if the recommendations that we make are not implemented, or there's still an unexpected budget challenge with the school department, or it resurfaces, that the mayor of Everett should be authorized to be a voting member of the school committee through a special act of the legislature. Now, to be clear, that is not a recommendation of this report. We are encouraged by what we've seen in terms of progress. We hope that continues. But there are, I think, 29 other cities, many of them similar to Everett, where the mayor is a voting member of the school committee, and in many cases the chairman of the or chairperson of the school committee. So there's precedent clearly for that. And as I go back to what we had said about the importance of the school department to the city's finances, and I think that's one of the reasons that other cities do have their mayor be part of the school committee. But we are not making that recommendation, but we sort of tee it up should there be a need. So we thank the mayor for asking us to serve in preparing this report. We wrote it hoping it would be a useful document for Everett public officials and the general public, explaining city and school operations and the findings that led to our 9 recommendations. And we are grateful that we were basically left to decide what to report on and how, just among the 4 members. So this is an independent, objective report that we now submit to both bodies for consideration and hopefully implementation. So that completes our testimony of the task force. I don't know if there's other members of the task force that would like to say something.
So before we receive questions, I kind of wanted Sam to go through this report, and then I want to make a formal introduction of the members so they can stand and be recognized as I go through this, just in case you guys don't know who is. So from Harvard University, the Executive Director of the Center of Education, Policy, and Research, Dr. Fullington. The Chairman and CEO of Century Bank and Century Bancorp, Mr. Barry Sloan. And from LaSalle College and Chief Learning Officer and Chief Strategist from Thomas Leadership Solution, Dr. Thomas. And the retired President of Boston Municipal Research Bureau, Mr. Samuel Tyler.
Not when I was appointed, though.
At the time of appointment, you were the president. So the floor is open for questions. Sure, Barry, absolutely.
Just say before you start, I think my colleagues and I just want to thank Sam for doing an extraordinary job. He really led this process, put an enormous amount of time and effort into it. And I think we all owe Sam a round of applause.
This is just what happens when you retire and you have some time on your hands. I must say it was a nice transition from serving as president of the Boston Municipal Research Bureau and still getting involved with municipal issues.
All right, I'll go forward with the questions then, if staff is ready. I have Councilor DePiero and then Councilor Capone.
Thank you, Mr. President. And first off, I want to thank each and every one of you gentlemen for all your hard work in this. This has been long anticipated. I serve with Councilors Hamlin and McKinnon on the Finance Commission that meets monthly, so I've been very much looking forward to this, and I certainly hope the public understands how valuable this is going to be for us moving forward. My first question would be more geared for Dr. Easy. I know we're just seeing these recommendations now, but a lot of these seem like they could be implemented pretty quickly. Where could we be in terms of recommendations versus implementation timeline-wise?
You're correct. I think there are a few things here that we could move ahead quite briskly. For example, I think the extra personnel in Mr. Demas's office. Obviously, with him and HR and the mayor, they could figure that out quite easily. I think as far as the other recommendation goes, with the new potential portal, so I should say, for the budget system through the school system, the school department, that's something that we kind of want to tease out thoroughly to make sure that it corresponds with what's here in the city, and not having two separate systems. As Sam pointed out, the website and the school department website is definitely something that should be up and producing information so the public could obviously see. And everything else is pretty much up to these joint committee and working through it.
Thank you. And I've been saying for a long time that school department and city hall shouldn't operate like separate entities, and I'm very happy that for the last few months that hasn't been the case.
Indeed.
And there's been a much more spirit of collaboration and a lot of teamwork going on, and that's the best way to get anything done. In terms of 8 and 9, I know there's going to be a lot of unhappy taxpayers to hear those recommendations. They've kind of been promised a lot over the last few years, so I think we certainly need to find a happy medium in terms of meeting both of our goals there. And I know the market can't stay where it is forever. Everett's getting pretty expensive to live, and hopefully it stabilizes at some point. We can give some relief. But thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councilor Capone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to our invited guests, again, thank you for all of your efforts. And if I'm correct on this, I believe this was all volunteer basis. I don't think anyone was compensated.
No.
So you're a tremendous resource that was provided to this community at no expense to the community, and we thank you. We think all of you deserve a standing ovation for all of your time and effort that you put into this. So we do appreciate that. Couple of quick questions, and I was happy to see that the review was expanded. I know that the commission was tasked to find the financial operation of the school department, and I'm just curious as to what the genesis was to expand the role of that and take a look into the city's operating side.
Well, if you want to know the truth, it was because I worked at the Boston Municipal Research Bureau and I had some time.
Well, that worked to our benefit then. Fair enough. So, and I do think that we were aware of the pension situation that was funded at about 60. We were making some strides to get there because we all understood the significance. It's very important that we also see the other liability with the OPEB, how woefully underfunded we are. I know that we're trying to make some efforts there. We're very fortunate to have strong leadership in the financial aspect there with Mr. Demas. So I know that we'll get there, but it's good to kind of see that as well. So that's something that shouldn't fall off the table, shouldn't get lost in all of this. And I do appreciate that. The new position that you recommend with regards to the finance department, and that would be kind of like a liaison in order to stay on top of school financial policies, et cetera. Do you see that as a position that's, well, it sounds like it's a position that's in the finance office at City Hall. And do you see that as a position that should be funded out of the school budget, or is that something that should be out of the city's operational budget?
Well,
or does it matter from your point of view?
We haven't talked about it, but my opinion is that's a city expense.
Okay.
Serving the city as a whole.
Okay.
But just on your pension issue, I'm sure Eric's told you, but one of the things we're thinking about is that even if you're more aggressive and can get to full funding before 2030, when that happens and the accumulated deficit is paid off, there's going to be a substantial amount of revenue that now can be earmarked to OPEB.
Sure. Sure.
I know there'll be a battle for more.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Nobody wants to see a 1.8% funding.
Yeah.
You find yourself on the wrong side of the fence at some point. And then the last thing I take from this is that with regards to the mayor being a voting member on the school committee, you see that as kind of like a safeguard in the event that these implementations aren't successful. There seems to be some sort of an ongoing financial problem. But barring that, you don't see that as a need?
Well, not at this point.
Okay.
But I think we're also teeing it up to say it's out there.
Sure.
And may be considered at a later time.
Sure. And I just want to close with extending my thanks, and I know I speak for all of my colleagues and for the residents of this community, for thank you for putting the amount of time that you did, and at no compensation. And we will take the recommendations, study them, implement them where we can. And I do agree with my colleague. We'll have some discussions about 8 and 9. There are a lot of funds coming in, and we've got to do a lot with that. But we do appreciate your time, your effort, and your expertise, and thank you.
Councilor, if I may have
Yes, you may.
a second. So just to add to Mr. Tyler's statement about having enough time to dive into the extra funding issues and retirement, I think once they got this project, and the original issue was the school needing more funds to kind of survive for the year, I think in order for the task force to put a comprehensive report together, you have to get a grasp of everything that was out there financially.
And that makes sense. And we also underscore a couple of things that we need to worry about on our end.
Correct.
So I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilor Capone. I got Councilor Matusky and then Councilor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I really want to thank this task force. This is a breath of fresh air from your committee. And believe me, I've been up here for many years, and this is so refreshing to me. But you didn't address, or maybe you do in here somewhere, I haven't read the whole report, but the perpetual motion contracts and the pension, $600,000 for sick pay, is that in here anywhere?
No, we can come back.
That's not to be funny. Okay, so that's not addressed.
We had to stop somewhere because it would be another
Well,
year.
that should be looked at, but I agree with, excuse me, the other councilman. You know, when the casino was being implemented and voted on, the promise to the community was that we would again be the lowest taxpayers in the state. Most of that money would be applied to the tax rate. All our parks are done. We've got good schools. The people that voted for the casino want a lower tax rate. At one time, we were the lowest in the state. As you may know, I don't know. But I really do appreciate the efforts that you put in. You gentlemen are welcome to Everett, and I'm very proud of this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor McLaughlin.
If I might, one of the things we're thinking about, given the broader scope of the report, are sort of the other demands that are going to be placed on the city, and in terms of policy issues and management issues, and the economy. And so we felt it was important to point out that this is a sort of a new wave of revenue that ought to be really considered seriously as to how that can be used to best serve, the city of Everett.
Thank you. Councilor McLaughlin and then Councilor DeFlorio.
Thank you, President. Also, just to echo the comments of my colleagues, to thank you all for your hard work and due diligence on this, and also our representatives from the city, Dr. Easy and CFO Demas, for all of their hard work on this. Just a couple of quick questions that I just wanted to ask, which was the school committee members, were they involved in the daily operation of the budget previous to now? So the budget is approved here. It goes back to the school department. And is the school committee members involved once that transpires and the budget continues to go on a regular basis? Are the school committee members involved in the operation of the budget and how the money is spent and the oversight of the budget? Has that been a practice in years past?
I think it has, but to a more limited extent than the creation of the budget. Okay. So I don't think they've really dove deep into the spending issues to really understand the dollars and cost and whether it's sufficient. So I think we're basically saying it needs to be a higher priority than it has been, that it's equal in of importance. In terms of the overall management, it's also a charge of the city charter that they do that. Beyond just the creation of the budget. I mean, that takes a lot of their time, but also we're saying that all school committee members should, participate in that.
I actually was I thought I was on the understanding that they were involved on a more regular basis. If you watch some of the school committee members, they're always going into executive to recess to be able to talk about paying of bills and so forth. So I guess that's something that I've learned, that they weren't as in-depthly involved as or probably a lot of my colleagues anticipated or thought they were involved in. But I do think that's a good recommendation, because I think more of the members that can be involved in different aspects can break it down and understand the budget in a more thorough and meaningful way, I think is a positive. I just was surprised that that wasn't already happening. I thought that was something that was taking place.
If I may, Counselor. So I think in regards to your question, because as we know, there are long-serving school committee members here that have been around for a long time and done a great job with our schools. But I think as we explore, we realize that there was a subcommittee for finance that actually is in the school committee. And I want to tread lightly, but obviously the school committee appoints the assistant superintendent of business affairs to kind of oversee that aspect of finance, and the school being a bottom line number. Once that money is appropriated, expending goes from there. So I'm not too sure involvement of the school committee as to how much they do on a day-to-day spending aspect.
Is it appropriate to ask one of them? Doctor, is it appropriate to ask Mr. Ehler? I think he's the chairman of finance. I don't know if that's, if that's appropriate to ask him at this time, or if you want to.
Yeah.
Counsel, would you want get an answer from the school department?
Yeah.
School committee?
I think, is this on? I think we are actually involved. We do see on a monthly basis, and I think it came out from about 7 years ago about looking at burn rates. We do know where the funds are being spent on a monthly basis. And if you listen, we will say that our total burn rate, whatever it may be, would be at a certain amount. Yes, we do look at those when we're looking to see is anything going too fast or too slow. Personally, I'll always know that I've known for the last 6 or 7 years at least that our teachers are paid over a 12-month period. So that's why our employee costs for our teachers are always lower than what we should be. If we're at 75%, they're usually around 66%, because we know we'll be paying our teachers during the months of July and August. To clarify, maybe, and having talked to these gentlemen during my meeting with Mr. Parker, that I think it would be important for us, and I think the most important thing that I got out of this was doing a position control statement, and knowing that on a monthly basis, we want to know how many people were hired by the school system. We want to make sure that any new position that comes up will get presented to the school committee before it goes out to get advertised. And I think that that's the part that upset me the most about this whole report, especially when we had our conversation in April, that being unaware about the 65 and the 32 employees that were hired on after the budget was passed. And is it my fault? Do I take any responsibility? I will take responsibility for not knowing it and not having the information. But I think it's important that we are moving in the right direction. Our process with the budget this year with Mr. Demas, I thought it was really well done, that we had a great conversation back and forth. And just earlier this evening about another meeting that we had with the mayor, I think that going forward in the future, we're going to have a lot more cooperation and collaboration between the school committee and the Everett City Council and the mayor and his leadership team. And again, when we get on to the School Finance Review Commission, I think that will come out also. So, things don't happen quickly overnight. And as you said, sir, review this and see where we are in 1 year. I think that that's a good goal for us, to make sure that everything gets done. And as we go through the whole process again, getting the October 1st report out in 4 weeks to start the 2021 budget. And I think that we're on a good track, and I think nothing but better days ahead.
Councilman McLaughlin, I think the school committee member Frank Parker wants to speak, if that's maybe answer one of your questions.
So if I can add to that,
Get the microphone.
you know, one of the flaws that we've had is we've had.
Excuse me, we need a microphone so people at home can hear what you're saying.
So one of the flaws that we've had that was evident in talking to these gentlemen was that we have poor reporting tools. The only thing that we have is the burn rate, which David talks about. Now, if you look at the school year, we open up in July, it's August, September, things kind of go like this. School opens up and things start to spike, right? The positions they told about that were brought on but weren't funded would have probably shown in the December burn rate. That was right about the time that the financial shortfall was brought to our attention. So we were probably like a few weeks away from seeing that burn rate being reported to ask why. So we need better tools. And if you look at number 6, it talks about upgrading the budget software. So I forget who asked the question. We're going to take this report, we're going to accept it at our next meeting, and we're going to refer it to the Finance Committee to look at items 1 through 7 to see what we can do and how fast we can implement it. I can tell you that at our meeting on the 16th, there's already a piece on the calendar to change our rules. As they mentioned, right now the budget is formulated by the Finance Committee. The new rules, if accepted, will create a committee on budget, and it'll be a committee on the whole. So they'll be involved with the budgeting process from the start, which actually starts October 1st, until we present it to you and it gets accepted. Then the management of that will fall upon the Finance Committee. And with the new budgeting tools, the new awareness, the collaboration that's going on, the fact that Mr. Demas was at our budget process, providing input, oversight, things will change, and they have changed. Because I think one thing to note is that a lot of this is focused on fiscal year 18, but fiscal year 19 was a very good year for the city of Everett and the public schools. The collaboration, the School Finance Review Commission, the things that we did jointly back and forth, and Dr. Easy can attest to it. And as a result, we returned.
We're still working. Mr. Demas and I are still working on the final number, but the final number that we return to the city and will end up as free cash once free cash gets certified was over $2 million from the school department. That's the first time I can remember that the school department returned any money that I've been around.
So just in closing, I'm really happy with the report. I think it's fair. I think it's accurate. I'm very happy to hear that the city of Everett is such a strong financial condition. But don't leave here tonight just concentrating on fiscal year 18. Look what happened this past year, and it's going to continue. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. And if you get any questions, you can always reach me.
Charles Obremski, the Assistant Superintendent of Business Affairs for the school department. I've had multiple conversations with Mr. Ealer, the head of the Finance Committee, in regards to the financial condition of the school department this present year. I'm talking about this year. I told Mr. Ealer today was the first teacher payroll where we paid all the teachers, so we want to balance that, match that with City Hall. We added at least 140 new positions, all since November 1st last year, not all this year, but since November 1st last year. As you remember, when we created the budget and presented it to you, there was a little bit over $4.1 million in there for additional staff. We did hire a lot of additional staff this year for numerous positions. Some of it may have shifted because population shifts, so it may not have been the exact positions that were shifted to you, but I'm going to say 90% of them are the same positions. I told Mr. Ealer that before the October meeting, which I believe is either the 1st or the 2nd, we should have a Finance Committee meeting. I will put everything out in front of the members of the school committee so they understand exactly where we are in each line item. But particularly, the biggest line item in our budget is salaries. And right now we are fine in the salary line item. We had one minor problem in a maintenance area that a contract came in higher, not a lot, so I need to make sure we save that elsewhere, somewhere else in the budget during the course of the year. But before not the next school committee meeting, but the one after, we will have a Finance Committee. I will go over everything with the Finance Committee and the school committee members so I know exactly where we are this fiscal year so this problem never happens again, at least as long as I'm here.
Thank you. Councilman McLaughlin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I appreciate the information from the school department, and I will yield the floor to my colleagues.
Thank you. Councilor Florio and Councilor Simonelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to thank all you gentlemen for all the work that you have done. It's greatly appreciated. But I would also like to thank Everett Demas. He's a godsend to this city. The citizens of Everett are very, very lucky to have him, and we are also. My question is, most of my questions have been answered, but in regards that you recommend that the mayor should be a voting member on the school committee, which I agreed, and I voted against the charter for that reason. Now, in our charter, it doesn't say that. So how do we change that in the future, that the mayor should be a voting member on the school committee? So it has to be a home rule petition? We have to change the charter, is that correct?
Well, that is the charter. If you first of all, that's not our recommendation. Our recommendation is that if these recommendations aren't implemented, if the collaboration and cooperation continues and there's still school financial problems, then that may be an issue you consider. And we're suggesting through a home rule petition, which if it passed would be part of your charter. So right now the charter allows the mayor to be a member of the school committee, but not a voting member. So,
so it's not in your recommendations, I understand that, but you did bring it up.
Yeah,
So that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, it would be through a home rule petition, which would become then part of the city's charter.
Thank you.
Councilor Simonelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you for Councilman Simonelli. I have a question and a statement.
Go ahead.
My question is, how will the recommendation for the precaution of the school committee be if 2/3 of the committee already have relatives working for the school department?
Well, it's just basically saying they need to be careful. If they're in a situation where there may be a conflict of interest, then they have the ability to recuse themselves from the vote and not create a conflict. So it's really making sure that they're aware of the conflict and take appropriate action if necessary for votes that come before the school committee.
Zach, just pull your microphone closer, just so they can hear you at home. Thank you.
The Everett School Finance Task Force spent 18 months in the report with 9 recommendations to report to the school committee, which are not binding, to help overspending. To put the taxpayers' money to good use, Proposition 2.5 protects the superintendent and school committee to spend as they please, where they please to use it. The task force should have been binding. That way, the charge could be enforced with the new rules that would keep the school committee in line with their budget. Otherwise, the task force, with all its recommendations, which are only recommendations, will still only be recommendations. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
If I may,
did you want to respond to that?
I would not agree. I don't think the other members would agree. I mean, we're people who live outside of Everett. We don't have any official capacity. So for us to issue a report that then the elected members of the school committee and the city council would have to implement, in my mind, our mind, would not be appropriate. I mean, I think it's advisory, yes. It's public, and it's going to be reviewed by the school finance commission. So it'll stay out there, and I think they're reasonable recommendations that in our discussions, I think that both city and school officials agree to, most of them. I guess maybe not the last two, but that's politics. That's not policy.
I think one of your staff wants to speak. You want to get the microphone so we can.
I think I'll just speak loudly. Thank you. As we were negotiating amongst ourselves about how we go about this and how we go about these recommendations, one of the things that we talked about is that this is about people, and it's been about leadership and also about systems. And so in the whole process, I agree with my colleague, it wasn't for us to tell you exactly what to do. It was to make recommendations and to recognize the amount of risk that the mayor took in forming the task force, and that all of you as a city, to have all of us as outsiders to be able to make recommendations about the struggles and things that you have going on. So we acknowledged all that. But we also acknowledge that this is about people, and whether you go forward with those recommendations, it's still people and systems. And so if you don't take those recommendations and take them forward, then the things that we've talked about are all about what would happen if you continue those things. And we're expressly talking about taking these steps to prevent those types of things. Because although you have all of these windfalls that may be coming, if the same practices continued, those things would not be working in your favor.
Correct. Councilor Simonelli, you all set? Thank you. I have two colleagues that want to speak again, Councilor Florio and Councilor DePiero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to the 2/3 that you say that family members from the school committees are working for the schools, how did you come up with that figure? I'm not connecting it. Because we have a few members that are new that don't have anybody working at the schools.
I guess research.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And as of right now, the last speaker, Councilor DePiero.
Thank you again, Mr. President. I don't have any further questions. I just request that the administration put together a school finance review commission meeting as soon as possible, and let's get a jump on some of the stuff. And thank you again.
I'll ask one time if anybody from the council still wants to speak again, or from the school committee. School committee member, Frank Parker.
Thank you. I think if you read the report front to back, you're going to find out that there's a lot more than just 9 recommendations in here. Let me give you just one example, and I'll close with this. Page 13, school finances. Generally, the city of Everett has approved a school department equal to the state-determined net school spending, the state's determination of the threshold to adequately educate the district's student population. Net school spending is the suggested minimum. Now, if you turn to page 26, first paragraph, at least in my book, ends with the high percentage of high-need students in the Everett Public Schools, an operating budget beyond the state's current minimum requirement will be necessary. We budgeted fiscal year 19 up front with the help of the mayor and his staff. There wasn't any issues. Fiscal year 20, the mayor committed to $6.5 million over net school spending. There won't be any issues. So if you're looking for recommendations in this book, that's number 10. Highlight that, and let's use that to measure us against. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, I'd like to thank our guests for all your help and all your support.
I would just ask what the proper motion to be made here is.
Got some thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Is the motion to refer to the council and school committee separately?
That motion be placed on file.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
Move for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you very much, everybody.